welcome to episode 3 of the Do Not Disturb Football podcast. If this is your first time here, it is amazing to see you. If it is your third time here, welcome back. You're a true fan. It's nice to have you as well. Boys, I'd like to just start the show out by wondering, or just getting to know how you guys are doing. Nimmer, why don't you start? How'd your weekend go?
My weekend went really well. It was my cousins and brother came, as I mentioned last episode. If you didn't stay tuned, yeah, said that. So it was fun. It was fun. They had a great time. It was hot, but they enjoyed themselves. And then today, I don't know if you guys saw the news, but backyard sports is coming back, and that just like made my whole entire. Honestly, it made my whole year. So I'm super excited to play that. One of the best games out there in the history of video games, to be honest.
When you say it's coming back to
Yeah, what
PC or
stations? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't. It just said the article. They're like, in the article they kind of mentioned how like Jason Kelsey mentioned it on New Heights, and they said, I know a lot of fans want us to come back, so we're gonna come back. They just announced that they're making it, so hopefully it's not like that the GTA 6 BS where they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna make GTA 6. It's coming out in 2024. Oh no, wait, it's gonna come out in 2025. Oh wait, 2026. Oh wait, 2050. Like that sort of thing. So hopefully it comes out sooner rather than later. But I just hope they come out with football and baseball. But one I saw in the article, they're unsure if they're bringing athletes. So it might just be the characters, which would be interesting. I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah.
As long
Nevertheless,
as
it's gonna be a
Pablo's
good
in the
game.
game,
Yeah,
everyone's gonna be
Pablo
happy.
and Pete, first two picks, and you're good. That's all.
Yeah,
That's all I
you're
care about.
straight.
Yeah. So
Darian, how
yeah.
was your weekend? How are you doing?
It was pretty good. Had to actually head into work for a couple hours on Saturday morning. Had to recoup some things, talk to some doctors, but then headed on over. Got my hair cut. Told the boys I was gonna, you know, get some man things done. Had to look fresh for the homies for this upcoming weekend. So, always got to look sharp for the boys.
When
But
you
other
said
than that,
doctors, I was like, wait, what happened? But I forgot about the baby.
nah. But other than that, it was just a pretty chill weekend, hanging out with the missus, and just doing some things around the house.
Very
What about
cool.
you,
Hey,
Drew?
Nim, I'm getting
Yeah.
notifications that we're actually quiet, me and Darian now, and you're
Oh,
louder. So,
all right. I'll turn y'all up.
but while you're doing that, my weekend was good. Went and saw the Bills Steelers game. Will tell you, Nimmer, Russ is in trouble. I think that was pretty obvious.
Yeah, that was an embarrassment.
We'll talk about that a little later. It seemed pretty familiar. I
Oh,
I
oh, because the
I was
Broncos.
looking at
Yeah.
the field like, am I in Denver right now? Is this what's happening? Anyways, Justin Fields to me is probably the best quarterback for that system. We'll get into that a little later though. To kind of go into some of the things I did yesterday. I think it was around like 5 or 6 o'clock. Me and my wife have been watching Love Island.
Love it.
We knew that the reunion was going to be later that night, on Monday night last night. And she gave me this look in my eye because we were on, like, what's crazy is they have like 30 episodes in that season. It's insane.
Mm.
But we were on episode like 26 or whatever. And Sammy gives me this look. And I just knew it meant 7 hours of uninterrupted reality TV. So it was on. It was on like Donkey Kong. We watched the whole season within like 8 days. I don't know. So,
Golly.
yeah, maybe we'll start another podcast about Love Island Friday, Saturday. We'll,
Yeah,
we'll
count
think
me
about
out.
it.
Count me out.
Let's go
I can't do
into
reality
the
TV shows. I'm sorry.
let's go into the injury report. So I kind of looked through a bunch of injuries. It's kind of hard to pick what to talk about because some of these injuries are like undisclosed. I don't really count those because a lot of times that's just a player saying like I'm sore and I don't want to practice today or whatever the case may be. But the ones that I did think that were maybe worth mentioning. So Bills wide receivers Marquez Valdez-Scantling suffered a neck injury in the Steelers game. He is expected to miss multiple weeks. Wide receiver Curtis Samuel listed as questionable with the toe injury. Colts wide receiver Josh Downs questionable with an ankle injury. Las Vegas tight end Brock Bowers is listed as questionable with a foot injury. Justin Herbert returned to practice today, though. That's good news for you guys, Chargers, for you Charger fans. Both running backs for the Saints right now are listed as questionable for week 1. Alvin Kamara with a back injury and Kendre Miller with a hamstring. A lot of defensive injuries for them as well. Something to keep your eye on if you're going to draft that defense in fantasy. They're usually a pretty popular defense to draft. One of the bigger headlines that happened this weekend, Jaylen Warren for the Steelers is going to be sidelined for a couple weeks with a hamstring injury. The Cleveland Browns had their both starting offensive tackles go down in injuries. So Jack Conklin has a knee injury right now. I don't know what the actual status of it is. I know that they're speculating some sort of ligament. Don't know if anything's torn or if it's just sprained. Not sure what that is. But they had both their offensive tackles go down and their backups go down. So that'll be something to watch to start the season. Hopefully Deshaun Watson can survive that. Both running backs for the Packers are listed as questionable right now. A.J. Dillon with a shoulder injury, Marshawn Lloyd with a hamstring injury. And a pretty big story, Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill is listed as questionable and was seen wearing a brace on his hand at practice today. So that could affect a lot of people's number 1 picks.
Wow.
But hopefully it's nothing too severe. Do you guys have any reactions to that?
No, I mean,
Just a ton of injuries, man.
is
Like
that
even the
normal? Has
hamstrings,
this happened in the beginning of the season? I don't remember it being this much. I mean, some,
prominent, right?
huh?
I said this prominent. It's never really been like that, especially going into like the last stage of preseason. I haven't seen this many injuries going into week 1 here in a couple weeks. Like it's crazy to think that all these players are injured.
Yeah, I think when we're fans of the game and we're just watching, we don't really think about all the injuries. We might hear a player now and then and be like, oh, there was like that guy's injured, like that sucks. We're not going to be able to see him this weekend, blah, blah, blah. But when you're actually like looking at the injury report, it just keeps going and going. And you're like, oh my goodness. And I'm nervous. Like I'm missing a name or two. Those are the ones that I thought were worth mentioning, but
But
a lot of injuries.
Rondale Moore, right? Rondale Moore is on IR for the Falcons.
Yeah. He's got. I don't think they've said what actually happened, but it's a knee injury.
See, I wonder if they
Non-contact.
are disclosing this much injuries rather than in the season because, like, to prevent them from practicing. Like, if they
Or
have some type
preseason,
of
yeah.
soreness or if their, like, ankle doesn't feel just right, oh, they have an ankle
Yeah.
injury, so then they're not going to play or they're not going to play during the preseason. Kind of avoid them playing in the preseason. But like during the regular season, I feel like if they have ankle soreness, they usually just tough it out or they don't put it in the injury report or something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. I wonder if like players just don't want to play in the preseason, so they're just listing themselves as injured.
I mean, this might be the last full preseason that we have in the NFL. So, I mean, the way that you see this you see it firsthand. How packed was it? Was it packed?
It was a pretty good turnout. I mean, I was expecting it to be a good turnout.
Interesting. Yeah,
It wasn't like jam packed, but there was a lot of people there.
because like online, throughout the TV, it does not look. It looks pretty empty. I mean, maybe the front seats, but you can definitely tell it's not a full stadium. So I don't know. And then now they're doing combined practices. Like I feel like this year the combined practices have been the most out of any season. So maybe they're kind of testing the waters to see and transitioning into a 18-week season. I don't know.
Yeah, they're I've heard that they're talking, and I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that they're talking about taking the preseason away, and then they'll do like 2 to 4 weeks of joint practices and film those for people to tune into. but they don't want fights to happen there. All you're going to see there is fights. Doesn't seem like
Yeah.
a good idea to me.
It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a good idea. But
Plus, I'm not
We'll
trying to
see.
watch practice. Like,
Yeah.
we talk about practice.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think
I'm gonna-
what they're gonna do is at least have the first two. They're gonna, instead of 4, isn't there 4 weeks of preseason, right? So
Mhm,
instead of
yeah.
4 weeks, it's gonna be 2 weeks, and then the 2 weeks for the regular season. So there's
I mean,
still gonna be a
I can't-
preseason, but it's not gonna be 4 weeks, which I think is.
I
like,
can't
feel
imagine.
Go ahead.
I can't imagine myself sitting down and watching kickoff 8 times in a row.
Yeah,
Like-
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't really watch preseason anyway, so for me, it kind of would be the same.
Yeah.
I feel like there'd be a lot more clips out there, but it'd be harder to judge a player based off practice. But I guess preseason essentially is just a live practice, so I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know how I feel about it. I'm kind of for the 18 game season. Obviously, I'm not a player, but I don't know. Practice.
Yeah, well, if it gives you that day off for after the Super Bowl because it'll line up with what is it, President's Day or something like
Yeah,
that.
President's Day.
I'm all for that too.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
All right, so let's go to the first story of the day. This was something that we touched on last week, something that could happen. The Falcons signed former Broncos All-Pro safety Justin Simmons. This is another defensive star that the Falcons have added to their roster. As a Broncos fan, I've watched a lot of Justin Simmons. There's no one in the league that's picked off Mahomes more than Justin Simmons. He is he's like a basketball player that plays football. He's like kind of like the Keenan Allen of safeties. He's very long and lanky, very elusive, very quick, but will like put a hit on you if you're not looking. He's a good addition for the Falcons. Let me get your guys' reaction. Darian, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of surprising to see how long it's taken for him to sign anywhere or even get an opportunity to even talk to a team. Honestly, I like that the Falcons added him to pair with Jesse Bates. I mean, dude just came off of a All-Pro second team year, even a Pro Bowl nod. I think perhaps the issue that it took so long is that he's 30 years old. So maybe it's the age that's the factor that these teams aren't looking at him for. But I think it was a long time spent being away from the game. But I'm happy that he's signing with the Falcons, bolstering that defense and that secondary. So Jesse Bates, Terrell, and him in that secondary, it's pretty nasty.
And that defensive line.
Yeah.
Nimmer, what's your reaction?
I just liked your eulogy, with just like a goodbye. That was like your little goodbye statement, because that was funny. But I think the Falcons are all in. I think that the Falcons are really showing that they're really trying to win it all this year. Adding Justin Simmons and Judon last week, I think that they're trying to improve both their offense and their defense, which is really cool. But they're in a pretty tough division. I mean, pretty easy division. So it should be interesting during playoffs. So, but with this signing and Judon signing, let's go back to, I think, episode 1, where you guys thought the Falcons were gonna, or the Bucks were gonna win the division. Do you guys still feel that way, or are you guys leaning more towards the Falcons now?
There you
Yeah,
go.
I'm still leaning Bucks. I just think there's too many weapons. Defense is still pretty good. They have some youthful talent over there with Winfield. But overall, yeah, I think Bucks still take it. Falcons, I think, will be second, but it would be that kind of that last little bit of the leg of a race. We're 10-7, 9-8 type of records to see who wins.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like all these teams in this division have really good star power, except for maybe Carolina, unfortunately. When you look at the stars that the Falcons have now, I mean, some of these guys like Drake London, I wouldn't really consider a star yet. Kyle Pitts, I wouldn't really consider a star yet. Bijan, I guess you could say he's not, but I think he's going to be good this year. I think all those guys that they brought in on the defense are stars. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll come down to like scheme versus firepower, and who's going to win that. I think I'm still leaning the Bucks. I'm not going to lie, because I like their defense still. I like Levante David, Antoine Winfield Jr. on the back end, one of the best safeties in the league. They have solid offensive line play and good receivers. And Baker, who's, shown some promise last year.
True. And Kyle Trask. Shout out Ian. But yeah.
Kyle Trask. The other big signing of the weekend was cornerback Stephon Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore agreed to a 1-year, $10 million contract with the Vikings. This was, I thought, a little surprising. I kind of wondered Stephon was going to go. To me, I thought was going to go to like one of those contending teams, like, maybe the Bills, maybe the Jets, maybe someone like that has a good defense around him already. He probably feels pretty good under the DC. What's his name? Robert Flores, the Flores system. I'm assuming that's what brought him in. Nimmer, what do you think?
I think that the Vikings had to do something this offseason, especially the way that their offseason is going. So I like this signing from the Vikings, but was he a free agent? He was a free agent, right? And the Cowboys just didn't want to. It was Cowboys, right? He was on the Cowboys before. Yeah, just making sure.
Yeah.
The Cowboys just didn't want to sign him, right? Is that what happened, or what? Why did he not? I feel like the Cowboys need something, and he was.
I think he's been signing 1-year deals with a bunch of these teams. It's kind of what Revis was doing at the end of his career, just signing 1-year deals for like the most amount of money, and then just move on to the next team.
Interesting.
He's doing some journeyman work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good signing for the Vikings, but I don't think it's gonna make or break their season.
Yeah. Do you think? Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree. It's a pretty good signing. With the unfortunate passing of Kyrie Jackson just a couple months ago, that you need to really fill that need of cornerback that you drafted in this year. So it's a good signing to get a veteran to help out in that secondary. What I love about it is that I kind of use the term or the phrase that Nimmer used and coined is the older the berry, the sweeter the juice. And I guess Gilmore still got juice in him to be signing these 1-year deals, $10 million. So I think it's a good signing, bringing in a veteran into that secondary, help out the young folks. And then I think they're going to go into the draft next year and go corner and just bolster that secondary.
Does he have enough juice?
Hey, whatever he's got, it looks like it is enough.
Hey, older berries always have juice, just letting you know.
I want to leave the conversation at that. Let's go to the next topic here. I guess this is the same topic. Why do you guys think these contracts are both 1 year?
For me, I think for Simmons, no, I think it truly is what you said, Nimmer, is that they are older. I think Simmons, you could argue 30 being old, as we're approaching 30. Nimmer, you already hit 30. Man. It just, I guess it's in NFL standards. If you surpass 8 years in the league, you're old in a sense. But I think Simmons, especially coming off an all-pro year, granted it was second team, you think he'd still be a high caliber talent. I believe Jamal Adams was still on free agency, or he still might be, and still he's youthful too.
He signed with the Titans.
He signed with the Giants. Titans. Even that, him going before Simmons, and Adams has had some decline in his performance over the past years. I think it is really just due to due to age. But I think it's going to be a prove it year for him for the Falcon system for them to get a longer contract. I think it'll be more of like a 2 to 3 year type thing after this year.
I don't know
Yeah.
what he has more to prove. What about you, Nim?
I think it's just I feel like the later in their careers are, unless they're with a team for a long time, or they're like Travis Kelsey or Patrick Mahomes or one of those like Tom Brady, one of those big names, like huge names. I think that they don't really they just want as much money because they're going to be retiring within the next couple years, and so it's I don't want to say it's starting to hit them, but they're starting to understand that like, all right, well, I'm not going to have another income, so let me, try to get as much money as possible. Especially like the Vikings, they're not going to the Super Bowl. The Falcons probably aren't going to the Super Bowl. They're probably going to make the playoffs, but not going to make the Super Bowl. So if you're going to a team that isn't going to make a Super Bowl run at least, then why not just get as much money as possible, and then the next year you can get just as much money, or that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's the reason. What about you, Drew? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I do think it has a combination of age and I don't know. I hear a lot of these like big network TV guys say that the safety position is getting less and less valuable. I don't really understand that because like the whole defensive backs like is a it's just like the offensive line. It works together. It's
Yeah.
if you're saying safeties are like less valuable, then you could say that about the linemen or like the tight ends with the linemen. Like it doesn't make sense to me really. Like I said, I think Simmons is a star in this league, and I hate to see him go. But at the same time, I understand completely that why he left. He's been kind of in no man's land for a while now in Denver. So it's nice to see him go to the Falcons. Thank God he didn't go to the Chiefs or something like
Oh my
that. That would
God.
have killed me. So I'm glad that he ended up in the NFC with the Falcons. But now we will discuss Brandon Ayuk. So this was a thought that I had during the game while I was watching it. My question to you guys is where does Ayuk have the better fantasy season? Is it in Pittsburgh or is it in San Francisco where he is now? Nimmer, why don't you start?
I don't know. I've been kind of teetering this because the Steelers, he would be, I feel like he'd be the number one option, but over picking or maybe 1A 1B type of thing. But with the Niners, you have McCaffrey, and you have Debo, and you have Kittle. So I feel like he would just get less targets. Um, I don't know. I feel like the Steelers, he would do better fantasy wise, but I feel like he would go farther. No, I don't know. I think I think the Steelers. Final answer. I don't
Darian, what
know.
about you?
It's tough. I want him on the Steelers,
Yeah,
so I guess I'll just say Steelers.
yeah. I mean, as you saw with last year, him putting up a performance of 1,600 yards. I mean, he gets his touches over in San Fran, but there are a lot of mouths to feed over in the Shanahan system. Like Nimmer mentioned, you have McCaffrey, you have Debo, you have George Kittle, and then you also add in Ricky Pearsall into the mix. That's a lot of mouths to feed going forward into a system. And if you want to get your money and you want to show your worth, I think the better option would be to go to the Steelers, where, like Nimmer just said, it could be like a 1A, 1B system with Pickens and then throw in Calvin Austin to take off the lid of the defense, which would open up more routes for him, more opportunities. So I think fantasy wise, better option would be to go to the Steelers, despite the whole QB controversy. You do have Russ being a veteran QB that once you gel with him, he'll get you the targets, he'll get you the ball whenever need be. Um, but to answer your question more pointed, Steelers would be the better option fantasy wise.
Yeah, the only reason I wasn't 100% on the Steelers is because like our offense is our offensive line more specifically is questionable. So it's are we and with Arthur Smith's offense, it's more of a run heavy offense. But I still think that the Niners just have too many mouths to feed with all this drama that's going on with Ayuk. Granted, I don't think it's really affecting the locker room, but maybe it's affecting maybe the coaching style. Maybe they know that depending on if they sign with the Niners, how long that contract is. If it's just a year, then they know they're not gonna have him for too much. They're not gonna have him next year, so then they're not gonna give him the ball as much. I don't know. I feel like he's just a deep threat in the Niners offense, but with the Steelers offense, he would be all around receiver.
Yeah, I would have to say he's gonna have a better fantasy season in San Francisco.
Hmm.
I just think if you look at his numbers, they've gone up every year in that system. I feel like the focus when they're passing the ball has gone away from Debo and more to Ayuk. So I would say Ayuk probably has a better season in San Francisco in terms of fantasy. Um, and it also comes down to who's throwing him the ball. So let's get a little deeper into this Pittsburgh Steelers and Buffalo Bills
Do we
game.
have
So
to?
this isn't a Steelers, huh?
Listen, do we have to?
Yeah, we do. We have to. This isn't a Steelers show, but we have a Steeler fan on the show, and I live 5 minutes away from the stadium, so we're going to talk about the Steelers. I had even better seats than I thought. I think I was like 5 seats or 5 rows up.
Oh wow!
Maybe 5 or 6 rows up. So I was like right there. Like when the pregame started, Josh Allen was standing like right in front of me, and I was like, dude, that guy is huge, massive. And the game starts, and Russ gets out there, and I could just tell by the way he's walking onto the field. I was like, oh, he's not ready. And he gets sacked on the very first play, and then doesn't get a first down. Second drive, not even kidding. The guys behind me are like, put Fields in. It's time to put Fields in. And then more guys behind them go, yeah, no, it's definitely time for Fields. I was like, you gave him one drive. Like, this is going to be a problem in Pittsburgh if we're giving Russ one drive and we're already calling for him. And when Fields gets in, it's like a whole new system. He fits that system a lot better than Russ does.
Mhm.
That Arthur Smith system is a lot better for a mobile quarterback. Russ is no longer that. It's unfortunate. And I hate to say it, when I watch him now, I wonder if he can read defenses. Like, I think Pete may have covered up a lot about Russ because he got absolutely killed on one play. He tried to step up in the pocket and like left his feet a little bit, and someone hit him like right under the chin. And he like went to the ground and it looked like his head was spinning. I was like, wow, that looks a lot like what I was watching in Denver. So my point is, I think Russ is in trouble. It wouldn't surprise me if he didn't get more than 6 games starting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's at the most. I think it's possible he could play 2 to 4 games and Pittsburgh will be calling for Justin Fields and then you have to put him in.
Yeah. One thing I enjoyed about the Steelers offseason wasn't the fact that we got Patrick Queen. We got we got 2 solid. Russell's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. And Justin Fields still needs to prove himself. You don't think so? After what he did in Seattle, you don't think that'll put him in the Hall of Fame?
Not anymore. I don't know. It depends on what happens here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, fair enough.
If he can turn it around and get maybe a Pro Bowl, I don't see that happening. Then he's fine. If he could like maybe go 500, then he's probably fine and be in the Hall of Fame. But if he has a losing record here in Denver and in Pittsburgh,
yeah, Then
Yeah,
people will
just
say it was a coach, but it was
shop, bro. It's gone.
but nevertheless, we got him for $1 million. Like the Broncos are paying the majority of his salary. So even if he shits the bed, it's really no loss on us. Like yeah, lost $1 million, but in all grand scheme of things, we didn't really lose a lot. We might have given Justin Fields maybe a better mentor than if he just came to the Steelers without anybody else. But the Yinzers want Fields.
They do.
um,
They really do.
but yeah, I definitely I was weary when we signed Russ, but then when we got Justin Fields, I was just ecstatic because I think that the Bears completely screwed over Justin Fields. And I don't think that they gave him a fair shot. I don't think that they gave him that many weapons around him. The defense wasn't really that good. I mean, it was kind of towards the end of the season, and he was playing pretty well. Granted, he was coming off an injury and stuff like that, but I can definitely see Russ, especially with our hurt offensive line. I think that is the biggest thing. I don't think it was really Russ as much as it was our offensive line. We have a new right tackle. We have two of our offensive linemen rookies got hurt. We just put one on IR. Our offensive line is hurt. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think that Russ, the reason that he is kind of frantic is because of the offensive line. And he's scared that he's going to get hit and all that type of stuff. So, and he's not a mobile quarterback as much as Justin Fields or all the, these other mobile quarterbacks that these defensive linemen are so used to running, trying to run down. So I think the Steelers, I mean, granted, this is the hope I have. So any Steeler fans that are watching, this is my hope. Last year we were undefeated in preseason. Matt Canada's offense looked good. Kenny Pickett looked really good. We were going into the season like, all right, we're gonna do really, really good. We just went undefeated. Offense looks like it's clicking. Blah blah blah. Season starts. Starters go in. And we fire our offensive coordinator. We got rid of our whole entire quarterback room that season. So, I don't know. I think that it's just preseason, and hopefully when Russ gets a full game under his belt, he'll do better. But I am scared of those Yinzers. Those Yinzers are not scared to speak their mind. So, and I think nowadays in the league, if you have a good backup, they're coming for your head. Unless you come out the gates swinging, your job's on the line. Which I don't see the Steelers just cutting Russ. So even if he shits the bed first 2 games, they're not gonna be like, all right, yeah, go in Fields. But I give it 5 weeks with 5 really bad games from us, and then Fields will go in. The good thing is that our first half of the schedule is pretty easy, and then the second half is a gauntlet. So once we figure this stuff out in the first half, that when we go through the gauntlet, we'll be fine. Sorry, that was my tangent. It was a long tangent.
No, you're good. Darren, I'll let you. I have a rebuttal for Nimmer, but I'll let you go. Darren.
Bring it on, Drew. I'm ready. No.
No. I saw something where Tomlin said that both aren't where they need to be going into the season. So I mean, if your head coach has some thoughts on both QBs going into the beginning of the season, I mean, you got to dog it out. It's kind of a big question mark, like you mentioned, Drew, of like who's going to throw who the ball. But at the end of the day, I do have a personal bias towards Fields. I think he just wasn't given a clear shot over in Chicago. There was not that many assets. I mean, he had DJ Moore. That's really all I could think of that was there.
He popped off with DJ Moore. DJ Moore was top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. So, I mean.
I know. I drafted him. But exactly. Outside of that, he had Darnell Mooney, like Claypool for part of the season.
Back.
He left. No running back situation. Dude had nothing. And then they were rebuilding the O-line. So I think Fields definitely deserves a shot. And I think, like Drew said, he looked like the better QB in the system. Is he where he needs to be the most efficient QB in that system and in the league, be top 16 at that top half of the league? No, but with having a mentor like Russ, being in the system, building rapport with his teammates and that chemistry, I think he would be the better fit going forward. He's more explosive. He's more dynamic. Just the ability to have rushing yards. He had 42 yards rushing on the 92 yards passing. I mean, that's what you want to see in a mobile QB and in that system. It gets people going. It prolongs plays. He's an improviser and just gives hope for the Steelers offense. Quick tangent. I wouldn't say Caleb Williams is overhyped, but he is definitely given a fantastic situation with his surrounding support cast. But he is showing some signs of stardom. But I do think he will be a great QB later on in the league. But definitely within this first season, it's got to be.
There was this like huge overhead view of one of the plays that he had. It was insane. So he rolls out to the right, and this guy's like hawking him down, and he stops completely, and the dude goes flying past him, but then comes back to him, and he starts running again and throws it over everybody into the corner of the end zone, right into someone's hands.
The thing is with Caleb Williams is that number one, it's preseason, so the fact that you're excelling in preseason isn't really that big of a deal. But number two, I think that the way the Chicago built the team around him, he's gonna. Quarterbacks always get the glory and always get the hate. So if they win, oh my God, Caleb Williams is the best rookie quarterback ever, but then all of a sudden they lose and then all of a sudden he's overhyped. So it really just depends, but I think that the Bears didn't deserve the first rounds, the first pick. They ended up getting it from the Panthers. So they took advantage of that, got him a bunch of weapons, got him a pretty good defense, a great running back. So I think that he will be overhyped just because he has that supporting cast to help him exceed. But yeah, so
the only problem I have with Bears fans are the ones that think like there's not going to be a struggle with Caleb Williams. Like at some point he's going to struggle in the season.
Yeah.
To think that a rookie's just going to come in and set the world on fire and then win a Super Bowl his rookie year, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. But luckily for the Bear fans, their schedule in the beginning of the season is pretty easy when it comes to, even though they're in the hardest division in the NFC, their schedule is pretty easy in the beginning of the season. So just can see the Caleb Bear fans just, oh my God, the best quarterback ever. He's on Tom Brady's level. I'm like, all right, chill out. Like, I don't know.
I will say he reminds me, when I watch him play, he reminds me a lot of Aaron Rodgers. It's really? Some people want to compare him to Mahomes, and I could see that as well. But he's very he improvises really well on the fly, has pretty good arm talent, and a little bit more speed than you think. So it'll be interesting to see. But back on, I was watching that game live, and I'm thinking this all comes to me pretty much when the offense comes out. I'm like, so there are a lot of rumors that Ayuk really wants to stay in San Francisco. They haven't agreed on the last year of the contract, but they want to come to an agreement. Steelers are just kind of there as a backup plan if they can't get anything done. So with that, now you look at this offense with no Ayuk. Let's say that doesn't happen. You're with George Pickens, wide receiver 2, Calvin Austin.
Probably
Roman Wilson is hurt.
Freiermuth is going to be our number 2 option.
Freiermuth, yeah. We'll talk about him tomorrow. But really, that offense is, in my opinion, a little inept. I don't know what they're going to look like. Like I said, I think they will struggle if Russ is the guy behind the center. You will get some juice when Fields comes in, but I was just looking up at his record. His career record is 11-29.
I mean, with the Bears, let's keep that into consideration. I mean, he finally got
I'm
a
just saying,
receiver. He
it's a
finally
little
got a
worrisome.
receiver last year with DJ Moore. You know what I mean? And they did pretty good. But yeah, as for the Steelers offense, I feel like they are just going to be a ground and pound team, and they're going to have it's going to be like the old school Steelers, where their defense is going to win the games, and all we need, Russ or Fields, whoever it is, but in the beginning of the year, it's going to be Russ, not to turn the ball over. If we don't turn the ball over and punt them, pin them down, have our defense, we're going to win 10-17 or 10-13 or 7-10. You know, we're going to have a low scoring game, but that's how the Steelers are going to essentially win games, especially against those tough opponents later on in the year. We're definitely not going to be, the top 10 offense or anything like that, but I can definitely see us. I mean, last year we had Rudolph and we went to the playoffs. So that gives me hope, and that gives me, and none of those games that we won were pretty, and we had a fired head coach. We fired our OC. We literally played quarterback roulette and had 3 different starting quarterbacks throughout the season. So I think that the Steelers are not going to be as bad as people say. Like, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it could be an overreaction. It was just a preseason game.
Yeah. But it was very 9-3. That's how we're gonna win. We're gonna win
9-3.
like a 9-3 game type of thing.
Yeah, it was worth all $60 for those tickets.
Bro, out of all the games, like.
But yeah, I'm really interested to see how they do. I would say I was higher on them before I saw them play live.
Yeah.
And now
same.
I think I'm not as high on them.
The biggest thing for the Steelers, and the last thing before we move on, the biggest question mark and the biggest thing that's going to help us win games is our offensive line. We're going to live and die by our offensive line, and if our offensive line is hurt or they can't block or they can't run block or they can't do anything, then that's going to be our offense. We're going to run our offense through offensive line.
That's been the problem, I feel like, for a while now for the Steelers in the O-line.
Yeah, even with Big Ben, you would always see Big Ben scrambling and try to like just block. But
with everything that's happened, Jaylen Warren getting hurt, Najee Harris's stock has risen higher and higher. So that'll be interesting to see. Darren, did you have any words on this?
No, I think pretty much covered all the bases there for you.
For you
Steelers fans.
It's going to be such an interesting year. I'm so nervous about this year. But to answer Hayden's point, I don't think Caleb Williams is going to have 4,000 yards. I don't think.
This season, probably not, but
he
next
will be
year,
the first one, yeah.
But he will be.
Yeah. Our last headline of the day for the first part of the show is Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce names Gardner Minshew as the starting quarterback. Let me get you guys' reaction. Darian, why don't you go first?
Honestly, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, it's Minshew mania. But you go after a guy in free agency, he's going to come in, he's going to compete, he's going to try to get that starting job. So I'm not surprised that he was able to beat Aiden O'Connell for the starting gig over for the Raiders. Now, I mean, he's like Minshew mania was. He's exciting, he's electric, he brings some just media attention, which the Raiders, I think they need, especially being kind of the stomping ground of the AFC West for a very long time, bringing in some new talent, new youth, and trying to beat the Kansas City Chiefs is the goal in mind. So I think he does give you the best opportunity to win games and do it with talent and get Devontae Adams the ball, get Jacoby Myers the ball, even their youthful tight ends of Mayer, and Bowers. There's a lot of talent on that offensive attack, and I think he's going to definitely utilize his receiving core to the fullest.
Are you targeting anybody on that offense, Darian?
Honestly, a lot of folks are talking about Zamir White. He's being that fringe guy of, oh, do you take him? Do you not? I'm actually going to erase even Tay or Myers off the board. I'm targeting Brock Bowers. I was seeing him in several different schemes and being off the ball. He was playing out wide. He's a Swiss Army knife for that offense, and it's going to be a playground for him. I mean, especially having talent like Adams out on the wing, he's going to open up the middle, and that's going to be his playground because that dude is huge. That dude's a freaking monster, and I would take my bet against him in a linebacker. He's going to come out on top, taking that ball down and laying a blow too. So he's definitely going to be the most exciting person in that offense, and I'd be targeting him, and especially the later rounds for his value, just with how they're utilizing him.
Nimmer, what about you? Were you surprised about the Gardner Minshew news?
I don't think so. I think that they got Garner knowing that he's going to be a starter. I mean, I think people forget that O'Connell. Right? O'Connell. I knew I was saying it wrong. O'Connell was a rookie or a second year. Like, he's fairly young. So I think that Minshew will show him the ropes. He's going to be competing for the spot, but I think that showing that him essentially being a backup behind like a pretty good quarterback. I mean, I feel like all O'Connell saw was Jimmy Garoppolo, which that's not really the best quarterback to go behind. So I think Minshew is going to be a good quarterback. I really wanted them to get Michael Penix from the draft. I thought Michael Penix would be really good in that offense. I think that they needed another really good weapon and a really good running quarterback. But I mean, the Falcons got him. But nevertheless, I think I'm not surprised that this happened, but I will be surprised if he signed a 1-year contract, 2-year.
I don't really know.
I think he's only there for like a couple years, so I will be surprised if O'Connell doesn't start playing.
Are you targeting anybody on their offense?
Yes. So with Minshew, I feel like last year he would always go after the wide receiver 2 position. And so that's Myers. And then Myers is wide receiver 47. Zamir White's running back 22. So you also have Najee Harris, James Conner, and David Montgomery, which I would choose all 3 of those over Zamir White. Then you have Adams, which is the wide receiver 10, which you also have Evans, which I feel like they're kind of even, but you also have Collins and Harrison Jr., which I feel like are a better option in my opinion than Adams. And I really like the show receiver made me really like Adams, but I just feel like he's not gonna. The value isn't quite there, so I feel like Myers, you can get him at late 11th, 12th round, next to guys like Mike Williams, which we talked about earlier a couple episodes ago, Tyler Lockett and Mooney. So I feel like the Myers has a better option, better value in the draft. But so yeah, that's who I would target. What about you, Drew?
Well, I would say I was a little surprised with starting Gardner. I know they drafted Aiden O'Connell, I think it was 3 years ago. And I think he was like a 6th round guy. I'm not sure, but I think it was later in the draft. To me, I thought the way they've kind of been trending is I thought they were going to try Aiden O'Connell until the wheels fell off. I thought they were going to try to see what it was like this year. Second year in the Antonio Pierce system. How would that look? I kind of thought that they were going to go with Aiden O'Connell. I thought both the quarterbacks were probably similar in like talent. But as soon as you see Gardner Minshew as the starting quarterback, you're like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. He's one of those eccentric quarterbacks. I feel like he's like the new age Fitzpatrick, but also like a little bit of like Rich Gannon in him or something. He's like,
oh, don't tell Raider fans that. Oh, I know a bunch of Raider fans. That
I'm saying from a personality standpoint, he's
Yeah.
like he's a very eccentric kind of guy, which is cool. And for the Raiders fans that are listening, I am undoubtedly the biggest Raider hater to walk this planet. I hate you guys.
I like the Raiders. I'm from Oakland. We'd always go to the game, so we can even. It's like yin and yang.
With that being said, first of all, don't shoot me. Second of all, sorry. Second of all, I do think the Raiders are going to be a little surprising this year. I'm not saying they're going to go to the playoffs, but I do think there's a possibility they finish second or third in the division.
Why do people? Why is everybody thinking that the Raiders are not going to do that well? Like,
I don't really know. I think it's probably because Antonio Pierce is so young, so they're thinking he doesn't have the experience to coach.
Yeah.
But I feel like at the end of the last season, they did pretty good. So
they were punking people.
That's what
they
I'm
were
saying.
punking the Chiefs.
Yeah, they punked the Chiefs. They put 60 on the Chargers. So then why aren't they getting the respect that they deserve? Like, I don't understand. They're in the odds. They're third. They're supposed to get third place. It's either that or they're just really valuing the Chargers a lot more than they should, which essentially I feel like they do every year. But like even in the odds for the first week, the Raiders and Chargers play, and the favorites are the Chargers, not the Raiders, which is mind-boggling to me. So I don't know. Can you guys help me out on that? Because I can't see it.
What do you think?
I think it's just typical dark horse, like media attention or propaganda. Like you put a team down. They made some offseason moves. They had a decent draft, but you see Harbaugh come in to the Chargers. He's big name. Oh, he's going to change how the Chargers play. And then Antonio Pierce, who's been a player's coach the entire time of last year when he was an interim going into getting accepted as the head coach, the locker room bought into him as well as him buying into his team. I think that's just a true dark horse right there. So like Drew said, they might be very surprising. I do think that they could find themselves being second in the division and punking. I think they catch one against the Chiefs this year, just like they did last year. I think they catch them early and keep the race hot in the AFC West. So I think the Raiders are a dark horse this coming season.
And it's like the perfect team for all these big network guys to be like, yeah, they're a horrible team. They're an awful team. That's the perfect team to do it for, because they're going to wrap their cleats up and they're going to run people over once Sunday comes.
Yeah. I don't think did you guys see that?
It's weird to me that people are describing them as like awful. That's just weird to me.
They think they're going to win like 4 or 5 games. And I was like, 4 or 5 games?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
But did you see that one of the Raider players like was mimicking Patrick Mahomes? And I was like, oh, big mistake. I would not do that.
He said with the Kermit, I'm a bitch or something like that.
Kermit the Frog. And I was like, funny. Wouldn't really do that. But I think the Raiders are the only ones in that division that actually can compete with Kansas City. So I don't see it. I don't see why everybody's hating, or the books and all the media is hating on the Raiders. Like, how can you not like? Oh, I guess Drew, I understand why you can't like the Raiders, but like, how can you not like Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, even Antonio Pierce? Like, how can you not like them? They have such a nice, like, not nice personality, but they just have such a personality about them that it's so hard to hate them, in my eyes. I mean, obviously, Drew, you have
their defensive line is going. Their defensive line is getting super overlooked, I think, with Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins on the same D line. That's going to be a problem next year, especially for teams in the AFC West. It's a lot of disrespect going for the Raiders, and if I'm talking about it, then it's a problem. But anyways, someone that I am targeting on the Raiders offense, I am actually going with Zamir White. The reason I'm saying that was because I think once the season ended last year, people were pretty good with Zamir White. They kind of wanted Zamir White to be a big fantasy guy this year. And then as like we're getting closer to the season, people are starting to call him like the Alexander Madison of this year, because that's kind of what happened last year. Alexander Madison had the starting role and then didn't do well for the Vikings. And now he's the backup to Zamir, which is funny. But I think if you look at Zamir's numbers, you could say it's a small sample size. Those last 4 games, he had 17 carries, 22 carries, 20 carries, 25 carries. So that is a volume of like a bell cow running back. He really kind of is one of those old school guys running the ball. He averaged 4.3 yards per carry. And let's not forget he went to Georgia. This isn't Alexander Madison who went to Boise State. This is someone that played well, got almost 300 carries at Georgia. I think he is worth taking a look at. If he's someone that's falling, if you go with James Conner in front of him, I get it. But if he's falling and you can pick him up, I think he could be a pretty good steal in the draft if people let him go farther and farther in the draft.
The only thing I have against Zamir White, it's more not against him, but it's like Josh Jacobs had the top 5 most carries, but didn't finish in the top 5 within running backs. So I feel like that also kind of deterred me from Zamir White, because I feel like, yeah, he's going to get a lot of touches, but then can he deliver and can he do that? Like, can he execute those carries? And I mean, Josh Jacobs didn't really do that. He did it in the beginning of the season, but I feel like the tail end, he just did not do as well as he was supposed to.
I kind of feel like Zamir might be the face of that offense. If you start handing him the ball and then chucking it deep to Devontae, that could be the recipe for them. If you have someone in the backfield that is just going to run through you every time. And that's kind of what I see with Zamir, honestly. But we are going to go to break. We will see you guys in 5 minutes with our fantasy football banter. Welcome back to the Do Not Disturb Football Podcast, where football is forever. I am Drew Pelter. To my top left, that is Darian Pickett, and to my top right, that is Nimmer Munakash. Follow us on all of our social media. We are on TikTok, Instagram, X. I know I've been calling it Twitter.
You'll always be Twitter in my heart.
The official
always Twitter.
name is X. I haven't been on said X in a long time, so I feel kind of weird getting back onto it, honestly, through our account. But we are doing Overcooked and Overlooked. This is going to be a reoccurring segment we have on this show. These are players that we think are being drafted too high, maybe disappoint. Those are the overcooked ones. And then you'll have your overlooked players who maybe getting drafted later or just not being talked about as much that could be as good, if not better, as that overcooked player. So Nimmer's going to do running backs. I'm going to do quarterbacks. Darian is going to do receivers. Nimmer, why don't you start with running backs?
So, one running back who I think is cooked or overcooked, I should say, is Joe Mixon. I think that he's a great addition to Houston, Houston's team for wins, but I don't think that fantasy-wise he's going to do that good. I don't think that the Texans are a big running team. Granted, it might be because last year they didn't have a good running back, but I don't see them going away from the pass. When you have C.J. Stroud, plus you added Diggs, and you have Dell as well as Collins, I don't see them getting away from the pass. And honestly, I mean, he's a RB14, but within that, you also have James Cook, A-Chain, Kenneth Walker, who I would put all above them, above Mixon. I don't think he's going to be the worst running back. I just wouldn't pick him. I think he's going round like 3 or round 4. I don't think that's way too high for him. I would put him more towards maybe Najee. So I think that, yeah, he's my overcooked. Am I doing overlooked too?
Yeah.
Okay. My overlooked is Edwards. So now that Harbaugh is in I was gonna say San Diego, in LA for the Chargers, the first thing that he mentioned, or I guess the second thing after he mentioned how good Herbert was, is that he's gonna just ground and pound. I mean, that's how his offense has always been, and I feel like when you have a ground and pound head coach, you need the running back is going to excel, and so I think that Edwards will excel, especially in the goal line. They're probably going to run the ball first and second down, and then try to pass it and get the first down. Plus, their first round pick was an offensive lineman, so that just shows you that they're really going to run the ball a lot this year. I'm not really high on the Chargers, but I think that Edwards is very overlooked. He's going against people like he's going in the 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th round, and that I think that's way too low for him. My honorable mention is Najee. I think kind of same thing. I think the Steelers are going to go back to the old Steelers way. I think they're just going to ground and pound. Now that Warren's hurt, I think that as you mentioned earlier in the show, his fantasy value just skyrocketed. I think that they're going to try to establish that run game first, and then the second half, they'll probably air it out a little bit, or later on in the game, they'll air it out. But I think Najee also is a pretty overlooked player.
Darian, what about you? Who's your overcooked and overlooked?
Man, for overcooked, and I mean cooked. I honestly mean cooked. Drake London with the Atlanta Falcons. I am not sold on him at all. I mean, in his first 2 seasons, he hasn't even posted 1,000 yards, nor has he put up more than 4 touchdowns in a season. So to break it down even further, last year he had just shy of 70 receptions, 905 yards with 2 TDs. as a wide receiver one, I mean, the TD department is where it's your bread and butter, and he was lacking there. I mean, it could be due to QB play, yeah, but I mean, if you're putting up almost 1,000 yards, yeah, you should also reflect in touchdowns. But also in his rookie campaign, did hit just over 72 catches for 866 yards and 4 TDs. So the touchdown department is where he's lacking, and I don't see him where he's being drafted with an ADP of around ADP of 25 or being ranked at 13th or even 15th in the wide receiver column over guys like DK, Waddle, Pittman, Mike Evans. No shot. I'm taking those gentlemen before I even look at Drake London and that Atlanta Falcons offense. So be wary if you have, or if you see him on the board. I'm passing him, and I advise you to pass him up as well, especially when you have guys like I mentioned that are still on the board.
And who is your overlooked?
Now, when it comes to overlooked, it's actually a grouping of folks. It's going to be the Buffalo Bills wide receiver core that is outside of Dalton Kincaid. I think when you have a top 5 QB, you know he's going to be slinging the rock. Yeah, you have a wide receiver one of Keon Coleman. He's a rookie. His ADP is around 101, which I think is a fair assessment, being in around like the 10th, 11th round, where you see rookies tend to get drafted. I think that's a fair placement for him. But then you have ADPs for Curtis Samuel of 133 and ADP for Khalil Shakur being 136. So bracketed pretty close. That's like fringe, not even being drafted in fantasy. I've done some mock-ups, and Curtis Samuel was basically waited until like the last round 14, 15, where people pick him up. And I think folks would be remiss if you didn't pick up any of the Bills receivers, because I think with just how dynamic Josh Allen is being a top, they're going to get their target share. It's going to be a healthy offense once they get everything under wraps. And I think Shakur, even he showed late last season that he can be a very dynamic player in that offense. So I think if you see him in the later rounds, don't be afraid to put him on your bench and ride it out for a couple of weeks, see how they fare, and then perhaps put them in your flex spots.
I like that point. So for me, I did quarterbacks. I feel like it was a little harder to find an overcooked and overlooked player, but I will kind of give you some advice about drafting quarterbacks in fantasy draft. You're going to have your top 3, top 4 guys. You're going to have right now, quarterback 1 is Josh Allen, 2 is Hurts, 3 is Lamar, 4 is Mahomes. If you want to step out on a limb and draft them in the second round, third round, be my guest. I'm not drafting those guys. I'm going to take a running back or a receiver that puts up way more numbers than they do. But you're going to still get some solid play out of those guys. The one quarterback that does give me worry is the quarterback 5, that is Anthony Richardson. He is my overcooked player.
Hot take.
It is a little bit of a hot take, but I think when you look at his season last year, so September 10th, week 1, he had a knee and ankle injury. Week 2, comes back, gets a concussion, ruled out of that game. Comes back in week 5, shoulder injury, and that ends his season. So he played 4 games, I believe. And when you watch him play, there is no indication to me that he's going to be looking to take care of his body this upcoming year. I don't see a lot of, I'm going to take a slide here, or I'm going to run out of bounds. I see a lot of, I'm going to jump over you, or I'm going to jump through you. And I love that. I see the potential with Anthony Richardson. I understand what kind of a threat he is, but it's way too high to draft a player that has gotten hurt so early in his career and have him as the quarterback 5. Even the guy after him, CJ Stroud, I think is a big risk taking there at the 6th spot for quarterbacks, because he's not a runner. At least you have that argument with Richardson. It's even more risky, in my opinion, with Richardson, because I do think he could get hurt at some point in the season. And if you're starting quarterbacks out, that makes it that much harder to win that matchup that week. My overlooked quarterback, I've been high on him for a while now. This is Jaden Daniels. I think there are some guys around that draft pick. He is the quarterback. He's the quarterback 12. I believe Dak is at quarterback 9. You have Caleb Williams at 16. Those guys with whoever you took in place of Anthony Richardson, say like Joe Mixon or T. Higgins, like someone who's going to produce, and you have Jaden Daniels, a dual threat runner, and can pass the ball, we've seen through this preseason, I think that is a much, much, much safer option. I would not draft one of those top 5 quarterbacks this year. I think it's a big risk. The one guy I could see the argument for is Josh Allen, because he's going to be the number 1 threat on their team.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be running and throwing all over the place. So he's the one guy I could see an argument for. And Mahomes maybe. But at the end of the day, I think it's too risky of a move to draft quarterbacks in the first 2 or 3 rounds. I would go closer to the 10th round where Jaden Daniels is being drafted right now. So.
Yeah. And I think with Jaden Daniels, I mean, last year the Commander, I was gonna say the other name, but the Commanders they were like the number 1 sack team. So with Sam Howell, and Sam Howell wasn't really a running quarterback, so I feel like with Jaden Daniels, with the Commanders offensive line, and I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Darian, but I don't think they added too much to their offensive line, did they?
Just a couple pieces. It wasn't a ton. It was more of a rework for defense.
So I feel like when a running quarterback gets pressured so much, he's really willing to run, and that's essentially where a lot of the quarterbacks get their fantasy points, by those rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, obviously. But yeah, I don't know about AR. I think that because he suffered those injuries, it wouldn't be a bad option. That shouldn't be the only reason you do it, but I agree that he is a lot higher than he should be. So I don't know.
I think I'm not saying Jaden Daniels is going to have CJ Stroud numbers, but I do think at the end of this fantasy season, there's a chance we look at him like last year's CJ Stroud, where he's like the quarterback 10, 9, 8, and is doing real work for your team. And if he's the second quarterback you choose in the draft, that is good news for you if he does end up doing really well. That would be my overlooked quarterback, Jaden Daniels. We now have who would you draft? We did the Houston Texans receiver room last week. This week we have, to me, an even more fun receiving group. This is the Green Bay Packers. You have 4 guys that can pretty much produce on this offense. Jaden Reed came in last year, played all over the field, did really well in the slot. Christian Watson coming back, who is probably one of the biggest speed threats in the entire league, coming off hamstring injuries and I think other soft tissue injuries. What's his first? Dontavian Wicks?
Yeah, Dontavian Wicks.
Who had some touchdowns last year, has looked good in this preseason. There's been a lot of hype, I know, from Green Bay fans around Wicks this year. And Romeo Doubs, who came in with Watson, and there was always like, who's better, Watson or Doubs? So, there's our guest again.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
So, Darian, why don't I start with you? Who are you drafting from the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I got to go with my guy, Jaden Reed. He finished last year 18th among all receivers, and he's being utilized somewhat adjacently like Debo in San Fran, putting him in the slot, getting some run opportunities, or the forget what the play is actually called, but like a quick snap.
End around.
The end around jet sweep pass, that kind of situation, getting those situations closer into the red zone. He's broken off long plays with those, but being able to be kind of a dual threat in a sense in the offense. So I think Jayden Reed would be my first priority when it comes to the fantasy draft. But then I will say there's been a lot of hype, especially with other content creators talking about Dontavian Wicks and what he can do and him being a sleeping giant for this Green Bay offense. Mind you, I don't think any one of these guys is a bad option. And with Jordan Love slinging the ball, these folks are going to eat. They're going to produce. And Wicks, I mean, last year finished with 119 points PPR standard. So a fairly decent year, especially being a quiet name in the league that I don't think truly anyone in our league even picked him up. So he's definitely somebody that I will be watching. He will be watch listed as soon as we get out of the draft just to see how he does and performs during the season.
Remember, who are you drafting from this receiver room?
I couldn't agree with you more, Darian. I think that Reed is going to be the best option when it comes to fantasy. I think that, well, before I say this, I don't think I would choose any of the receivers. I think that me personally, I don't like drafting a receiver with different options, especially with Jordan Love not having a favorite receiver. So, but if I had to choose, I definitely would go Jayden or with Reed, just only because he had 64 receptions, and then Romeo Doubs would be my second choice, who has 59. So Reed led the team in receptions with 64. He had he had 14 red zone targets, so that's a pretty high target when it comes with a packed wide receiver core. And he had over 300 yards after catch. So within a PPR league, that is fantastic because that means that he's getting those quick screens, that he's getting those quick slants, he's getting those nice out routes. So I think that if you're in a PPR league, I would definitely go Jayden Reed or Jalen Reed, right? Jaden. Jayden Reed. But if you're going in a standard league, I would go Romeo Doubs. He had 18 red zone targets, and he only had 5 less receptions than Jayden Reed. And he had 134 yards after catch. So usually in a standard league, it's all about touchdowns. So he and Romeo Doubs led the team in red zone targets, and that's really Jordan Love's favorite red zone target when it comes to So if PPR league, I'd go Jayden Reed, and then in a standard league, I'd probably go more towards Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, it's a interesting wide receiver room just because all these guys are young, and they've all really shown flashes at certain points in the season where you're like, man, that guy could be the number one guy. We're all on the Jayden Reed train. He is probably the most versatile receiver in this draft, or in this not draft, this receiver room. He can run a lot of different routes. Like Darian said, he can be involved in those jet sweep sort of plays, but also can really route you up. He's a route runner that finds his way to the end zone more often than not. I do understand the logic behind the Christian Watson pick. If that is someone you are trying to go after, I can see the logic with it. He's probably like the sexy pick of the Packers receiver room because he has so much top end speed. And 2 years ago, he was a pretty dominant receiver. With the soft tissue injuries that he's gone through, it worries me a little bit. So if I had to pick between Jayden Reed and Watson, I would go Jayden Reed all day. But don't forget about Romeo Doubs. He is, to me, probably one of the most underappreciated receivers in the league. And really, when you watch him, like you watch him one-on-one with corners, it's like a super fun matchup to watch every single time because he can high point the ball. He runs good routes. He'll stack you. He's He's very fundamental with how he runs routes. It's really fun to watch. But that is our who would you draft, and all of us are picking Jaden Reed. Is there someone you guys are fading here?
Fading. I think you touched on it. I mean, my issue lies with Watson's hamstring. I believe Ricky drafted him in our league, and he rode the bench the entire year until basically the playoffs. And like, just being mindful of that, like hamstrings come back, and it's a constant niggle that you have to fix and rehab. And so that's why he's someone that I am really fading. Don't even like look into this wide receiver core. I don't touch him. I'd rather go with Jaden Reed, Wicks, or even Dobbs. Dobbs definitely is a sound second option, but I would be fading Watson just due to those injuries.
Yeah, and I think I would be fading Watson as well, because not because of the injuries, because you have all off season to rehab, but except the hamstrings always kind of, for some reason, always end up coming back. But his ADP is 39. So it's either Reed or Watson, and I feel like in a PPR, Reed is going to get a lot more receptions, even though Watson's going to be a better deep threat. But I feel like I would, in a PPR league, I definitely would go Reed over Watson, and since Watson is right above Reed in the rankings, in the ESPN rankings, that's the reason I feel I would fade him. Even in Dobbs is going, 10th, 11th round. So at least with with him, there's not too much risk. You're not giving up as much, but with Watson, you're giving up a lot, and his ADP is a lot, really high.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just fade Wicks. I think there's too many mouths to feed. I know there's been a little bit of noise around him. I just didn't see enough of him last year. I know he scored a couple touchdowns, but really the guy that's played his way to be the focal point of the receivers to me is Jaden Reed. I think he could be a valuable piece on a lot of fantasy teams this year, but it also is, you kind of wonder who the target is for Jordan Love when he's back there, which I guess isn't a problem if he's finding everybody. For us fantasy owners, we kind of like to find the target and know who it is.
Yeah.
So
their tight end situation, decent touches, but had a couple of concussions, was on concussion protocol for several weeks. But then you see Kraft came in and was lighting up teams. And I was like, this is so odd. The backup tight end is getting looks, getting mad targets, and putting up crazy fantasy points. I should know because I picked up Musgrave and he put up 1 point and got concussed for 4 weeks. So, but no, it's definitely there's a lot of mouths to feed on Green Bay. It's kind of a quiet amount, but the wide receiver core is definitely the highlights. But that tight end group is something of confusion too, something to look at as well.
Yeah, and
I'm really excited for. Sorry, go ahead, Nim.
What are you excited for?
I'm really excited for that division this year. I think that's going to be one of the funnest divisions to watch this year.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree.
Yeah,
That's going to be the best division in the NFC. I think by a long shot. I think that each division, like each good division, I should say, has like 2 teams at most. But then the bottom half of the league, bottom half of the division, it's kind of, they're not really that competitive. But I feel like 3 out of the 4, I should say, I forgot the Vikings are in here. The 3 out of the 4 teams in the division really can win the division. Maybe not the Bears this year because of Caleb. I think he's not going to win it his rookie year, but they're still going to compete.
Yeah, even with them, it'll be cool to see their offense.
Yeah, but I feel like Wicks is going back to Wicks. I think that he is going to be a very inconsistent player. I think one game he'll give you 15 points, and then the next game he'll give you 3, and then kind of wishy-washy when it comes to that sort of thing. So I would go Reed, Dobbs, Watson, and Wicks in the draft order for myself.
I have whoever's coming out of the NFC North representing the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
That is
All
my
right, Lions it
prediction.
is, baby. Lions it is.
I don't know. I think if it's any team besides the Lions, maybe I guess the Packers I can kind of see, but I don't know. I mean, the Eagles are a force to reckon with. I think that the defense that the Eagles have, I think that the Packers, if it's Eagles and Packers in the NFC Championship, I think that the Eagles are gonna win it. But the Lions and Eagles, I mean, that's a different story.
They got to get past the Bucks first. That's the only thing.
True.
Not even gonna win the division. The Falcons are winning. I'm telling you. Clip it. I'm telling you, we're gonna come back next year, and the Falcons. It's gonna be Falcons Bucks, and I'm gonna be right. I'm telling you.
Clip it.
Yeah, and the Steelers will win the Super Bowl.
I said we were gonna go win the Super Bowl if we have Ayuk. Okay, I've been getting freaking. I've been getting flamed online. Like, oh, Steelers are going to the Super Bowl, especially after the Bills game. Like, oh, Steelers are going to the Super Bowl, huh? And I was like, well, if we had Ayuk, it'd be a little different, wouldn't it? But yeah. That's my thing.
The Mitchell for the Eagles has looked really good in the preseason. That corner that they picked up in the draft, Kenyon Mitchell, yeah, he looks pretty good.
Eagles
I'm excited.
Scary,
huh?
I said the Eagles' defense is kind of scary. Like they're very underappreciated. I think.
What do you think happens with that Cooper DeJean guy? Because they drafted him too, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't really fit on this team.
I just like the memes that have come out of it with the who's the other white DB that plays safety, Blankenship. I mean, just the nicknames that they've called him, it's been great. But yeah, I don't know if he like fits schematically. I know they also drafted a safety out of Syracuse the year prior, so there's just a lot of heads in that DB room. But I mean, they needed it. They were getting torched last year in the secondary. So adding Kenyon Mitchell, adding Cooper DeJean, having Blankenship back there. Did they have Bradbury last year?
Yeah.
James Bradbury. I mean, he was the one that was getting cooked, let's be honest. So
it's true. I think he's still there, isn't he?
If he is, he's finding himself further down the depth chart. But
I think they're planning on putting Mitchell in the slot at nickel and Bradbury still out wide.
God bless him. But
I think that's why the NFC is so top heavy, because the couple teams, I guess the Niners didn't really get better in the offseason. They just re-signed all their players, but they didn't really need to get better. It would be hard for them to get better because they're stacked almost in every single room. But, I mean, the Eagles, they needed a better DBs. They got better DBs. So did the Lions. The Lions needed DBs, and they got better DBs. So I think that – and then it goes – and I guess the Packers would be fourth ranking-wise, but I think that they're too young to go that far. But so I don't know. I can see the Lions, but I don't see any other team in the NFC East.
NFC North.
NFC North, sorry.
And the AFC East is kind of who we're talking about next. The quarterback competition in New England is still very alive. Drake May came out and had a more encouraging preseason start, 6 of 11 for 47 yards, looked a little more comfortable. They asked Coach Mayo after the game if it is still a competition, and he said, quote unquote, definitely still a competition. So you're looking at Drake May, Joe Milton, and who else they have?
Brissett. Not Brissett.
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah.
Jacoby.
Yeah, so I think the competition right now is between Brissett and Drake May. It's interesting because there were reports that Joe Milton was playing better than Drake May in training camp. With this sort of quarterback carousel that the New England Patriots have going on right now, are you guys targeting anybody on their offense? Do you think there's anyone worth drafting? Darian, why don't you go first?
Outside of Ramondre Stevenson, honestly, not really worth spending a draft pick. I think the closest folks would be Demario Douglas and then Jalen Polk. Jalen Polk being a rookie receiver, but just naturally, there's no true wide receiver one for the Patriots right now. They just released Juju. They have Devontae Parker also, I think, left too. So those big veteran names are gone. I think there's a couple of watch list players. I think Demario Douglas, he's a sleeper. See how he plays. He's a littler guy, so a little bit more dynamic, moving around the pitch. And then Jalen Polk, I think, just cutting the top off the secondary, being that speedster. I'd like to see how he plays going into the season, but I wouldn't say anyone's worth drafting or spending a value pick on. They're more waiver wire ads during the season.
Nimmer, agree? Disagree?
I think I disagree. I think I like Demario Douglas out of everybody. I think that, I think getting a number one. Right now he is wide receiver 59. So going against Rashid, who else? Andion Mitchell, Xavier Legette. So those players are kind of questionable, but at least you'll get a wide receiver one in that a really late round. I probably use my 14th pick or 13th pick on him. So I think that would be a pretty good find. I think that either Brissett's probably going to have a start in the beginning of the season, and then Drake May is going to fill in. But I think they need a target. They need a number one receiver, and I think that he can get it. If you can get a number one receiver in the really late rounds, I think that's a great value.
Yeah, there's been a lot of hype very recently about Polk and how he's looking. So I might just keep my eyes on him. I probably won't draft him. Maybe Hunter Henry. I feel like the tight end 2 on my team is just the guy that rots on my bench all year, and he seems like he fits the spot for that. So Hunter Henry might be someone that I draft. But it would probably be one of my very last picks.
I'm with you 100% there, Drew. Yeah, I think it's just I'll watch him at the corner of my eye, but nothing else, nothing more than that. I'm not wasting a pick. I learned that lesson with Antonio Gibson last year, being my, I think, pick 13, and he did absolutely nothing.
He's the backup now for Ramondre.
I know, which I'm not still wasting a pick on him.
So why would you guys pick Ramondre?
Ramondre.
Thank you.
He can catch and run.
Catch and run.
Yeah, because I picked him last year thinking the exact same thing, and he pretty much shat the bed. Ezekiel Elliott.
He was hurt though.
Huh?
He had an ankle injury.
Throughout the whole entire season, he wasn't that good. He had maybe 11, 12 points on average, but
2 seasons ago he was really good.
Yeah,
I think he finished as a top 10 running back.
That's when
last year. Yeah, it was a little down year.
But I don't know. I'm staying away from the Patriots. I think that I think that even they're just not going anywhere. They're going to be last in their division, maybe 4 wins. If they can sneak away with some, but I can't. I don't know.
Are they the worst team in the NFL this year?
Definitely. I think
it's hard.
Debatable.
I might give it to the Giants.
I'd say Giants are up there for me, being one of the worst teams. Patriots.
I think the Patriots have too many question marks. At least with the Giants, you have Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones is bad, but he's not. He's not Tony.
No, he's bad. He's pretty bad.
Jacoby Brissett bad. I don't know.
I might take Jacoby over Daniel Jones, to be honest.
I'm going to take Jacoby over Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
I'm 100% in agreement with you, Drew. To post a full half against non-starters, the Texans non-starters, and still throw picks.
Pick six.
Yeah, fair enough.
It
Two
baffles
picks,
me.
one pick
I'm not
six.
saying he's good, but I'm just saying I feel like the Patriots are really just trying to get the first round pick or first pick next year. I think the Giants are a close second, but I would put the Patriots over the Giants.
Who's the projected number one pick next year? Is it Ewers or Beck or who's
Number
it?
one.
Yeah.
I know the number one player is the edge out of Tennessee. I think his name is James Pierce Jr.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So he would probably be number one. If I'm the Patriots, I would pick him. I mean, you lose
You wouldn't pick a
Judon,
quarterback.
huh?
You
First,
wouldn't pick a quarterback.
no. James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher. I'm taking him.
If you're the Patriots,
Yeah.
I think you got to take quarterback.
The Patriots after they just
It's the
spent their
Patriots?
third pick on Drake May.
I guess there's May. Yeah, there's May there. I keep forgetting about him because that first preseason game was just so non-existent.
Yeah. And I think they're gonna put May in towards the end of the season, depending on how Jacoby does. But I think that they're just kind of testing the waters. They know they're not gonna do that well this year, so it's like why throw him to the wolves, ruin his confidence, maybe even get him banged up, ending injury, all that type of stuff. Then he has to come back from that. Why put him in while he can just kind of sit back, learn the offense? He's young. He's like 20, 21. 22,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. So
around that age, 21, 22.
just have him sit back, learn the offense, learn NFL football, and kind of take this season as an L. And it hasn't even started.
Yeah.
But
You watch Drake May's college tape, and it, for me, reminded me of Josh Allen. I think that's why they drafted him because they thought he was like the next Josh Allen. Hopefully
there's
that's the
definitely
case.
potential. I mean, in the preseason
Yeah.
game, he definitely like showed out, but I honestly would still rank him the worst rookie quarterback in the draft, at least, or first round, I should say. I shouldn't say the draft, but
I just hope.
worst
I
rookie
mean, it's
quarterback.
not Belichick there anymore. I just hope they don't destroy another quarterback. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mac
I
looked
miss
good.
Belichick, huh? Yeah,
Mac had a
Mac
pretty
went to the
good
playoffs
preseason
the first season. Remember?
game.
They
Yeah,
went to the playoffs.
it was
So,
pretty sad what happened to Mac. Honestly, I
yeah.
wonder if he gets like another chance somewhere else.
I mean, not in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
No, he was bombing it though for them
Mhm.
this last preseason game.
I mean, honestly, that whole draft, I kind of feel bad for. That whole quarterback draft, was that Trey Lance? No, Trey Lance wasn't part of that draft, right? No, it wasn't, because
Yeah,
that
he
was
was.
Brock Purdy.
He was.
He was?
He was number 2 in that draft.
Mhm.
It was Trevor Lawrence, Mac,
Fields.
Fields.
I don't think. Yeah, maybe.
There was a good number of quarterbacks in that draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
And
Kinda
there's
all
only
mid.
one starting.
at this point.
Yeah.
It's
Damn.
wild. But
The last topic we have today. This is 2 things you should avoid while drafting. So we will both, we will all talk about 2 different things we will advise you to not do during the draft. From guys that have been in fantasy leagues for years. If you're new to fantasy, this could be helpful. Just hearing these rules of thumb and kind of sticking by them. Nimmer, why don't you start?
So I have don't pick a defense too late. I think that the defense is arguably one of the most important positions on the fantasy league, just because with running backs and receivers, you always pretty much have a backup. Most of your bench is running backs and receivers. Might have a backup quarterback in there. But I think that defenses, you think there's really top like 5, 6, maybe 7 defenses, but you rarely ever switch them out. I think that, or if you do switch them out, then you're going onto the waiver wire. And I don't like waiver wire hunting every week for a new defense, because then you're spending your first waiver wire pick on your defense, which you just never know. So I'd rather have a nice, reliable defense, maybe round 10, 11. I'm not saying pick them in round like 5, but round 10 and 11, I think that's where you can get a good defense, as well as honorable mention. Um, I don't pick a player because you're hoping that the starter gets hurt. I think that like there's been talks over TikTok about like what's the Arizona running back?
James Conner.
Huh? No,
The
the
back was
backup.
Trey
Huh?
Benson.
Trey Benson.
Oh, Trey Benson.
They're like, oh, Connor's gonna get hurt, so Trey Benson's the like. Don't do that. Don't hope for an injury for a player. Number one, it's morally messed up, and then number two, what if James Conner doesn't get hurt? Then you just wasted a pick, and he rode the bench the whole time. There's plenty of starters. There's plenty of different. There's plenty of better picks than to pick a backup hoping they'd get hurt. Now, if you go Chase Brown because he's competing for the first spot, the first running back spot, then that's I get that. But don't pick somebody because you're hoping that the starter will get hurt. As well as speaking of starters, fill out your starters too early. You don't want to spend your first 7-8 picks just filling out your whole entire filling out all your starters. Like, don't pick a kicker first round, for example, or kind of pick and choose who you really want. Look at the value. If you like a specific player, like if you like Patrick Mahomes, don't pick him first round. He's still going to be there in the third, fourth. So those are mine. Just don't fill out your starters too early, as well as don't pick a defense too late. There's like a happy medium. There's just a happy medium. And if you don't know what that is, start doing mock drafts.
Are you picking a defense before your kicker?
100%. Because I think defense.
There are some.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there are some sneaky defenses that are out there that probably people aren't thinking about.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like my defense was last year was the Saints. The Saints had like the top 5 fantasy defenses the year before. So there's definitely some, but then at the same time, I would much rather have a Jets defense, a Niners defense, somebody that's very reliable that isn't going to put a bunch of points on there. Like the Chargers defense, people said that they were going to look good, and then they put 60 points on. They got 60 points on them, especially because defense is the only position, not the only, but the more popular fantasy position that gets negative points if they score, if they get scored on too much. So that's also something that can kind of bite you in the butt.
Yeah, I would. If I don't know how much time we're going to talk about drafting defenses, so I'll give the audience some defenses to kind of look at in the draft. Say you don't pick one of the top defenses, I would look at the Falcons defense with the new additions they've brought in. I would look at the Bears defense. They've been pretty good over the past 2 years. They could take a step up this year. Saints is always a solid one. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings too. I like the Flores system. And they turned around their defense from 2 years ago last year. So maybe they take a step up as well.
One thing
Darren,
about
what are
picking
your
defenses,
things?
this is my last thing. One thing about picking defenses is you also want to see the easiest schedule, like what teams have the easiest schedule, as well as if they have an easy division. So those are the two things that I really look for in a defense.
Raiders, they had a good defense fantasy-wise last year too.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Chiefs are the only really threat in their division, so that division's not that strong. So that would be a great one too, a sneaky defense.
Yeah, with the sacks probably going up this year, that's probably a good defensive draft.
Mm-hmm.
Darren, what are the things you advise to avoid in drafting?
So for me, it's really tailored to the folks that are newer to fantasy, starting out into their first league. Just things to be mindful of is if to avoid having low bye week awareness. Understand who you're picking when it comes to starters, especially like Nimmer said, filling out your starters list. Understand when they have their bye weeks, because if you end up stacking too many in 1 week, you're basically giving yourself an automatic loss unless your bench is great to recover from that. So, just understanding who's got bye weeks, look at the ADPs, look at top rankings, and then seeing how to best make your roster that doesn't have too many stacks when it comes to the same bye week. Just helps out keeping your team strong throughout the entire season. And then, secondly, is there's a lot of talk about upside this, upside that when it comes to players. And that's really banking on a lot of hope and a lot of luck for these players. But don't draft too much on the term upside over consistency. When I have players like Mike Evans, who's shown year in and year out that he can be over 1,000 yards receiving, have over 5 touchdowns in a season, I want the consistency through the season and through a career rather than, hey, oh my gosh, I hate to say it, but Kirk Cousins came into the new offense. Drake London's upside has just significantly increased. I want to see the work done. I want to see the numbers before I even spend a draft pick on a hope. So when it comes to those first-year fantasy goers, be mindful. Look at previous seasons where folks looked at or started out ADP-wise and then where they finished, and draft based on consistency first before you draft on upside.
That's a good point. My 2 things are also for people that are new to fantasy in drafting. My first point is stacking. So Darian kind of talked about stacking the same bye week. You don't want to do that. But I advise just not to draft 2 players from the same team. It happens every now and then. So sometimes it just kind of happens, but you don't want to go out of your way to draft Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. It's not going to end up well for you when that team scores 0 points in a game and neither of them have very many points. Now you're depending on all your other players to absolutely ball out for you to win that week. And especially once you get down to like the playoffs time, if you have a quarterback wide receiver combo that's on the same team and they're playing one of their harder games and you're in the playoffs, it's going to be a tough out for you and you might just be kicked out of the playoffs the first round in. My second point is drafting a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. I kind of already talked about this. I think it's super risky drafting quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. Just learned from our friend Quasi. He's done that a lot and he's been in the bottom 3 a lot as well. So
tell him the context. The first year he drafted Mahomes, Herbert, and Burrow, and
I think he also had Josh Allen. He had all 4.
I was going to say
his
like
first
one
4
more
picks
big
were all
one.
Quarterbacks.
So he picked all quarterbacks, and then he tried to trade them throughout the season, and no one was trading with him because he was trying to get like the players he should have been picking in the draft instead of Josh Allen and Herbert in the first 2 rounds. So it's just a general rule of thumb. You don't really want to draft quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. And I think this is something I see with newer fantasy players the most. I think they struggle with this a lot because you think football, the quarterback's got to be the number 1 guy. And most of the time they're not. I mean, there's some outliers where, say, Lamar Jackson has like the most rushing yards that week of any player. That might happen once in like 5 seasons. That's not something that's going to happen very often. So I would my rule of thumb is always draft quarterbacks mid to late round. You don't want to, there's a part you'll see, probably everyone that goes into a fantasy draft, you'll see where it gets to the 2nd, 3rd round, 1 quarterback comes off the board, and then the next 3 or 4 quarterbacks come off the board right after that.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a trend. That's even like defenses are the same. There's that one person that drafts a defense, and they're like, the people are like looking at their sheet. They're like, oh my god, you're right. I need to pick a defense, and then like defense. Kicker's the same
Yeah.
thing. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but that's just kind of the things we're advising to not do when drafting. That is pretty much it for us today. We have a packed show tomorrow. We'll be talking about a bunch of different things. We'll talk about the NFC or the AFC North and the NFC North. We'll talk about who finishes first, who finishes last in those divisions. Might talk a little Bo Nix. I liked his start over this past weekend. So I'll give you guys some insight on that. But for now, follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, X, TikTok, and right here on YouTube. That is Darian coming from Texas, Nimmer coming from Arizona, and me coming from Pennsylvania. Thank you guys for watching. It's always a great time. Have a good night.